The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you.
Jesus said to the chief priests and elders of the people, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a feast for his son's wedding. He sent his servants to call those who had been invited, but they would not come. Next, he sent some more servants. 'Tell those who have been invited,' he said, 'that I have my banquet all prepared. My oxen and fatted cattle have been slaughtered. Everything is ready. Come to the wedding.' But they were not interested. One went off to his farm, another to his business, and the rest seized his servants, maltreated them, and killed them. The king was furious. He dispatched his troops, destroyed those murderers, and burnt their town. Then he said to his servants, 'The wedding is ready, but as those who were invited proved to be unworthy, go to the crossroads in the town and invite everyone you can find to the wedding.' So the servants went out on the roads and collected together everyone they could find, bad and good alike, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. When the king came in to look at the guests, he noticed one man who was not wearing a wedding garment and said to him, 'How did you get in here, my friend, without a wedding garment?' And the man was silent. Then the king said to the attendants, 'Bind him hand and foot, and throw him out into the dark, where there will be weeping and grinding of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen.'" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Well, I want you to imagine, so it's some years before now, 8 or 9 years ago. I want you to imagine you're home one day and a motorcyclist rides up to your house, knocks on your door and gives you a big, big package. And as you open the package, you see that you have a wedding invitation for Meghan and Harry. And the Queen sends a personal note in her handwriting saying, not only are you invited, but this is all expenses paid. So your flight arrangements will be paid for, your hotel in England will be paid for, but you are an honored guest that they would love to have at this wedding. I want you to imagine that. And I want you to imagine that when the time comes and they're trying to make arrangements, the motorcyclist comes back to you and says, "Well, we're trying to get in touch with you, we haven't, but we need to make the arrangements for your flights," and you start beating up the motorcyclists. That's what you start to do. You beat them up, and you send them off. Now, how would that be? That would work? Well, that's what the gospel is saying today now. It was a wedding banquet that these people were invited to by the king. And the wedding banquet was invited by the king because his son is getting married. And you were personally invited. And the reason why you didn't want to accept this wedding invitation was because, well, you had all kinds of things you wanted to do. You had to feed your cows and you had business to do and you had a deal to do and you're doing a little construction on the house. And you could imagine, for the mundane reasons that they gave here, that you would give up a wedding invitation to go to Buckingham Palace and sit and deal with the thing with royal splendor as an honored guest. Can you imagine that you would ever make that choice? Or think about the choice of saying, something, that's too much hassle, yes? I had to go and buy clothes, I had to get a whole outfit, I had to deck up properly, I had to get plane flight, then I need more clothes again. No. I think I go stay home and watch it on TV. What about that? You could see yourself doing that? Well, our reading today is following on from our parable last time with the king and his vineyard, where he sent servant after servant after servant, and they just treated them badly. And Jesus is telling the same story using another image, the image of a wedding banquet. And this time, in this story, he's revealing himself not just as the heir to the owner, but he's revealing himself now as the son of the king. And not only is he revealing himself as the son of the king, he's revealing himself as the son of the king who is getting married and about to have a nuptial union, and that everyone is invited. This is addressed to the chief priests and to the elders of the people. And he's saying to them that you have been invited to this nuptial union. And because you have been invited, you're expected to attend. But you're too busy. You have too much on your plate. Too many important things in your life. You know, too many things, your house, your car, your business, COVID, whatever it is taking place, why you can't attend. And therefore, you're not only not attend, but you're treating the messengers badly. So in terms of salvation history, the text is chiding the leaders of Israel. Because when the prophets came announcing that the Messiah would come, they treated the prophets badly. They killed some, and they beat up others. And so he's talking to them of their salvation history. And every Jew in the first century, hearing the text, would have understood that Jesus was speaking about the way that the leaders of the people treated the prophets who God sent before to prepare them for the wedding banquet. For when his son would enter into nuptial union with the bride. And all through the salvation history, this image of God marrying the virgin bride, the people, has been part of the tradition. And Jesus himself sees himself as the bridegroom, marrying the bride, and sees the people as all being invited. To understand the passage a little bit more, you have to look back at that first reading, which is an incredible text. And I know many of us see it mainly as a funeral text because it talks about death. But on this text, it says, on this mountain, the Lord of hosts will prepare for all people. I want you to hear, for all people, a banquet of rich food and a banquet of fine wine, of food rich and juicy, of fine strained wine. On this mountain, he will remove the mourning veil. You know, there's sometimes when the translation of a text just doesn't do it justice. And this is one of those occasions. They went for making it intelligible for a modern audience. But because they did that, they missed the essence of what the text actually speaks to. So what the text actually reads closest to its original Greek is, on this mountain the Lord of hosts will provide for all people a banquet of fat things, a banquet of fine wine, of fat things that are juicy, and fine strained wine. Why fat things? Well, in case you're wondering, and you know, I know that people think that thin is where it is in. Sin is in, but fat is where it is at. I want you to understand that. Because Leviticus 3:16 says, and the fat belongs to the Lord. You go and check it. Leviticus 3:16. You know John 3:16, eh? Go and check Leviticus. So all of you all who fight in fat, the fat belongs to the Lord. The more you have is the more of you that he has. Because the fat is an image of sacrifice. And the whole of Leviticus 3 speaks about the sacrificial nature of the animal that is being given. And the fat, which was the most precious of what was there in the animal, was not kept for the person, but it was taken and given to God, and it was burnt on the altar as a pure offering to God, because that was most precious. And what he's talking about here in this banquet, first, is that the banquet is an all-inclusive. Not that you pay your big money and you could get in and drink what you want. It's all-inclusive in the sense that everyone is invited. No one is excluded. The price of the banquet is paid for you up front before you even try to enter. And you can enter at no charge. But everyone is included. Everyone. The second nature of the banquet is that this banquet is a sacrificial banquet. It's about a sacrifice that is being made by the priest on the altar for God. And so the banquet is all-inclusive, it is sacrificial, and the third element of the banquet is that this is mysterious or mystical or certainly heavenly, or at the very best, a miraculous event. Because the other piece of the text where we have, he will destroy death forever, the closest to the original Greek is that God will swallow up death forever. And that's an incredible image that he will just put his mouth around death, swallow it up, and digest it, so it will be no more. The death comes to an end because of this banquet, because of this feast, because of this mountain experience that we have. And to understand what is happening in the text is to understand that you and I have all been invited to this banquet because God has prepared for it. It is a sacrificial banquet, including a priest who's sacrificing on your behalf to God. It is a banquet where death is put to death and swallowed up so it can be no more. And therefore, through this banquet, and because of this banquet, death, where is your sting? And all the forces of death and destruction and negativity, where is your power? Because on this mountain, God puts death to death forever. To understand the text now, look back now at the psalm that we had. A psalm that we all know. The Lord is my, shepherd. There is nothing I shall want. And then it goes down, you have prepared a banquet for me in the sight of my foes. My head you have anointed with oil. My cup runneth over. And surely goodness and kindness will follow me all the days of my life. In the Lord's own house I shall dwell forever and ever. And the psalm speaks to it. That when we understand that God is our good shepherd, and when we understand that even though we may walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we must fear no evil, because his rod, his staff is there to protect us. And we also understand no matter how hard things might look, no matter how difficult things might be, no matter how death seems to encroach upon us from every side, no matter how all the difficulties of this world are pressing in on us, God is our shepherd. And there's nothing that we should fear. And more than that, this is not a banquet of scarcity. This is a text of incredible abundance, that in the midst of all the trials and tribulations of this life, the Lord has prepared a banquet for us in the sight of our enemies. And so we will be fine dining while they would be licking chops, because God is our Father. The text from beginning to end is speaking, using a language that is incomprehensible for us in the 21st century. But a language that a first century Jew would hear and hear really clearly. It is speaking a language of love, and a language of desire, and a language of frustration of a broken-hearted lover who has tried everything to convey love. But the beloved just will not hear, will not accept, will not take it seriously, and will not see that this love is the most precious gift that we have ever been given, and therefore put this love first above and beyond everything else. And this is what the text of our gospel is trying to convey in language that we find hard to hear. So let's hear the text again. You know, a man went up to heaven. He stood at the pearly gates. He met Peter. And Peter checked his registry, and he found his name eventually, after a long time. And he said, oh, I found your name. He said, oh, thank God. I thought for a moment, but the name, but it was hard to find, you see. He said, yeah, why is that? He said, you see, you only attended virtual mass, so we could only let you go to virtual heaven. You could go to the place, you'll have a big screen, you know, and you look on at what they're doing. That's all you could do. You look on, you can't taste the food, but you could see how much merriment and joy is going to be. Only kidding. Only kidding. The text is saying that what we invited to is a banquet beyond the wildest imagination of our human capacity. That ultimately, this is the invitation to heaven. That's what Jesus is speaking about here. This is the invitation to heaven. And he's saying that we can't tell you how to think about heaven, but if you've ever gone to a wedding that was really done with incredible joy, if you've ever had a wedding where the feasting and the wine and the food and the merriment was just incredible, that's the closest thing that we could speak about to talk about the kind of joy that is being prepared for you in the eternal banquet of heaven. And you have been invited. You have been invited. But being invited has an obligation. Once you get that invitation, you now have to make up your mind whether you're going to be going to the banquet or whether you're going to do all your other things that are so important and put the banquet on bay. And that's the problem with the modern world right now. That we don't understand what it is God has prepared for us in all of his love for us, his people. We don't begin to fathom the joy to which we have been invited. And we don't begin to understand that all the pleasures that we can have, all the notoriety, all the joy, all the things that this world can offer is nothing in comparison to what God has prepared for us, his people, here in this world and in the world to come, eternal life. Nothing prepares us, brothers and sisters, for what that great day will reveal when we see God face to face. Nothing in this world that you have ever experienced, ever encountered, ever known, nothing will even come close to the comparison of when you stand before your God and you know God as God really is. You look back at everything here and say, it is mere dust. St. Thomas Aquinas, at the end of his life, when he had written the Summa Theologica, the most powerful, profound, prophetic work of theology that had ever been written at that time. And he wanted to burn the whole of the Summa because he had a revelation of who God really was. And he said, everything I have written is straw. And he understood that in comparison to the grandeur of who God is, everything he had thought, everything he had written, was nothing and pale in comparison. Brothers and sisters, I don't think we get or understand the truth of who God is in God's incredible love for you and me, and the way that God is relentless and persistent in giving us the invitation to the banquet. But there's one man here who comes in without a wedding garment. I'm sure you heard that and say, well, what happened to that man, boy? Well, they grab people from everywhere. Highways, byways, they say, bring everybody, good, bad, alike. Remember, this banquet is all inclusive. But this banquet is a sacrifice. A price was paid for the banquet. And when it comes and the man doesn't have the right clothes, St. Gregory says that the clothing is love. Because what did Jesus come with? Love. I clothe you with the garment of love. And what the man did not have was love, because there's three things that last: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. The man had faith, and faith allowed him into the banquet hall. But he did not have love. And therefore he was not clothed with charity, and clothed with works of charity, clothed with a garment of righteousness, clothed with a garment of integrity. And therefore, at baptism, we put the white garment on the child and we say, receive this garment, bring it unstained into the heavenly kingdom. The garment is a garment of love. It is the only currency that we can spend here on earth that multiplies incredibly in heaven. Every other currency you try to spend here, you're depleting heaven. But when you spend love, and you spend it generously over and over and over again, when you are a person of charity, when your heart is broken for the sake of the poor and the plight of the marginalized, and you spend love generously here on earth, your garment is rich. And your appearance is fragrant when you come into the banquet in heaven, and you will receive a place in honor. But the marriage feast the fathers of the church have ever said to us is this banquet that we celebrate here, the Eucharist. Because the Eucharist is put between two moments. Holy Thursday night, when he celebrated the Eucharist and brought the men into priesthood, and Good Friday, where he consummated the union between himself and the bride on the cross. The Eucharist is the marriage feast of the Son and his bride, the church. This is where death is put to death. This is all-inclusive because all people are invited. This is a sacrifice, and the sacrifice here is not the fat of lambs or goats or sheep or bulls. The sacrifice here is the sacrifice of the Son himself, who gives himself on the cross that you and I may know the incredible, mystical, wonderful love of God himself. And it is to this banquet, brothers and sisters, you and I have been invited. And when the moment arises, and you have an opportunity to come to the banquet and experience the banquet in all of its fullness, come to the banquet, because God has invited you. And if you want the virtual kind, well, okay, you can't smell, you can't taste, you can't eat, and you could only view. And for those who have to deal with that for now, we have to deal with it for now. But it is only second best, or third, or fourth, or 25th best, because it can't compare with the real thing, where we eat the flesh of angels and we drink of the fine wine of the kingdom, and where we participate in the heavenly banquet itself when we are here before the altar of God and the angels of God are ascending and descending. Understand what you have been invited to. And never count the invitation as a hassle in your life anymore, but see it as a great honor and a privilege that you have been given, that you have been invited. And if you receive that invitation, brothers and sisters, please do not tarry. Do not sidestep. Do not get distracted. Come to the banquet, because God, your King, is waiting for you. Amen.